Okay, so hi, this is Mark Hamby here at Lamplighter Ministries, and I'm here with Lisa Mistiuk. Lisa is one of our artists for the Lamplighter Guild, and she is going to be teaching again for us this year. She couldn't teach last year. I think she was having a baby, right?
Yes.
So, Lisa, as we prepare for another Guild year, which is always exciting, something's always new. In fact, this year, I was going to have it at Mount Mohonk again, which is, absolutely like going through the back of the old wardrobe and coming into a new reality. But I decided to take a risk this year and have it here at our headquarters for a few reasons. One, we're going to be able to have our own recording studio this year, and we own 50 acres. It's just a stone's throw away from the headquarters here, and it's just there's streams. There's 3 streams, and it's about a 150-foot gorge. The sun rising in the morning and the sunsets there is absolutely spectacular. And so as I was looking at the scenery that we have here, and also that we're right next to the Grand Canyon of the East, I just thought that this year I think we're going to try something different. And you know what it's like at Letchworth, where you were painting the last time. And so we have this this new platform to show God's handiwork. So as the students are listening to this tonight, I just like to introduce you a little bit and find out who you are, where'd you come from, why did I choose you for the Guild? Because we want master teachers. The very first time I saw your artwork, I was like, I've got to find this woman. She's teaching at the Guild. So I love your work. It is one of my favorite. It hangs up in my office. I see it every day. And we'll talk about that particular painting later. But Lisa, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you love? What has God been doing in your life? How did you get to become a master artist?
Thank you, Mark. It's truly an honor to be back. I love being a part of the Guild. So let's see. I always drew, as many people do when they're little, and it wasn't something I ever thought I would pursue seriously. I never thought I'd be a master at all, and I was, you could say, kind of kicking against the goads of that calling on my life. It just didn't make sense to me, and I like things that make sense. So, but God works in mysterious ways. So I ended up in Germany visiting some family friends, and the mom of the family I was staying with just really pushed me into, she said, you have this gift, you have this joy when you're doing that. I want to see you keep doing that, and what do I do to make that happen? And I had people just really bend over backwards to sacrifice for me so that I could pursue that talent. One of the many reasons that I love to try to do that for other people as much as I can. So anyways, and the situation there, I ended up studying with a teacher. Really, we worked really hard putting together a portfolio and drawing for several months, and then I went to a portfolio day in Amsterdam just on a whim. At this point, I still wasn't fully committed. I thought, I'm going to do this to make them happy. And well, I got a scholarship to start art school in San Francisco, where my grandma lives. So, and she had been wanting me to come stay with her, so I went, stayed with her. She, I used the scholarship to start. She put me the rest of the way through school, and the way things unfolded, it was just clear. People said, Lisa, God rolled out the red carpet, and a few weeks into my classes there, I met the man I would marry. Falling in love was another thing I really didn't believe in, that also didn't make sense. So it was kind of, God just really transformed my heart in a lot of ways, and I kind of came to realize that the greatest gifts in life, the greatest things God has given us, they don't make sense. There is no explanation for beauty, for love, for art, and so I'm in the mystery. And that's not with that.
That's wonderful. That's beautiful. So you went to the San Francisco
the Academy of Art University.
Academy of Art. Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So Lisa, so you were preparing, painting all those years, and there was confirmation. I like that because I think that's important. I think a lot of people tend to go into fields that maybe they shouldn't be in, where they don't really have that confirmation. And also, did you have an insatiable desire to always be painting, always be drawing?
Yes, I did. And I
I
couldn't
think
understand that, you know?
I think that's a key. I see some people. I've had students here as interns, and they want to be a filmmaker or a photographer, and I've noticed something that especially the filmmakers, uh, I've seen them miss opportunities. I've only had one student here that I can think of where he would be looking. I mean, he would have his iPhone camera ready, and I mean, he was just ready. I mean, whenever he saw something, he was instinctive,
Yeah.
and he would be constantly taking videos of everything. And I think the same thing's true with artists. You see something that you love, an animal or a tree or a house, and wherever you are, you seem to like find a spot to sketch that, right?
Yes. Yes.
I think that's a good indication. I think that young people who are listening to this right now, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with their life. I think that God places in each one of us insatiable desires to do something. And I think if we would follow that, I mean, me, for example, I don't think that the only thing that I did growing up when I was a kid was to tell stories. I
Wow.
was a storyteller.
Wow.
And I did not ever put it together until I was probably in my 30s that that's what God wanted me to do. I love telling stories, and uh, and so I think people just got to look at the natural. Some children may love to babysit. They love other children. Or they love cooking. I
Yeah.
think you got to follow those natural courses that God has designed. It says in the book of Proverbs, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he'll not depart from it. And that training, I think, has a lot to do with following the bent that God has given them. So, okay, so you went to San Francisco art school. You got married right out of art school?
We got married our last year of art school. We decided we were better as a team, and we actually were. I honestly am not sure I would have made it through without him pushing me through.
Wow,
It was grueling.
that's neat.
It was,
Yeah.
people look at an education in the arts as kind of like a free pass, or you're going there to goof off. When you get into at art school, it will be one of the most difficult things you ever do. We have 3 kids, 4 and under. Art school was much more difficult. It
Mhm.
was, you know, so it was that level of kind of hard work and tiredness.
So, we have a lot of young people today that aren't even going to pursue, a college degree in art. How important do you think it is to go to college to get an art degree if they're going to pursue art?
The most important thing for being an artist is your skill set. So
Mm,
whether or not you have a specific degree or a diploma is really not that important, because at the end of the day, it's the skills that are going to give you your career. Um, of course, if you're looking at teaching art or different things like that, you might want to consider going to a place where you will end up with a degree, but it's not necessary. There's a lot of ateliers that have sprung up that are great for fine arts and illustration. My husband's a car designer. He went to the same school I did. For him, being in a more formal school environment is really important because you make all your connections, and
right.
that's kind of how you work into the industry a lot of times. So it really, there are so many fields and variations in the arts, and that's another thing I'd love to do for the students that can come. Is this isn't like a one-way path. This is what is God's path for you, because that's going to look different for every single person.
Mhm. I'm going to disagree with you just slightly, and let me tell you why. So I've been in postgraduate school since 1977, I think it is. No, well, I went to college in '74, and then got a bachelor's degree, and then I have been in postgraduate school ever since. I'm 60.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a lot of years in postgraduate work. 3 master's degrees, finishing my doctorate right now. It's my last year. Now, if I did not pursue those degrees, um, I would be lazy. I would not push myself. I would not be self-motivated. Now, I'm a self-motivated person. I'm extremely self-motivated, but I would not be as self-motivated as motivated as I am made to be in those classes. So, like when you were at art school, you were pushed beyond belief, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay, so I think would you have been pushed like that had you done it on your own?
Oh, absolutely not. I think whether it's a degree school or whether it's an atelier, to be in a learning environment, to be surrounded by peers is kind of crucial. However, you
Hmm.
can get that peer interaction to kind of make you go the next level is really important.
Explain Collier again. I've never heard that before.
An atelier is they're kind of springing up all over right now. It's kind of like a more classical method of arts education. For about 100 years, arts education was very, we could say it was kind of dead, you know. And so they've really worked hard to bring back like an education similar to what you would have gotten in like the 19th century. Um,
Mm.
yeah, it's interesting. So this is, a lot of times it's going to cost less than a university would, but you're going to end up with a very high quality education. So
How would students find something like that?
there is a great website. It's called the Art Renewal Center, arc.org. And if you go there, they have a whole list of what they call ARC approved ateliers. And so you can kind of find them all over the country and all over the world.
After we're done with this, could you email me that information? We'll put it on our website too. We'll put
Yes.
it with the guild information. That's worth its weight in gold right there, because that's what the guild is all about. The guild really follows that pattern. It's really a renaissance. Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, they were all mentored by. They were apprentices.
Right.
Um, do you know how old Michelangelo was when he started his apprenticeship?
No.
He was 5.
Wow.
He was 5 years old, and from 5 until 12 years of age,
Okay.
his main job was peeling potatoes and cleaning the house.
Wow.
And it's interesting that he really learned how to use a knife
Yeah.
very skillfully peeling potatoes.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? And him and Da Vinci, they lived down the street from one another, and they were rivals. Now, Da Vinci was a lot older than Angelo, but Angelo was an instigator, and he would always kind of cause some trouble and always be sarcastic with Da Vinci, and Da Vinci didn't like him at all, but they respected one another, and they were competitive during that time. And so, for me, the guild has that competitive. You're together, and it's what we're trying to do with the students that come there is to really get them involved in seeing a master at work, in learning from the master, because I think that's important. I think if you're just around people that are average in their work, I don't think it really inspires you to really move forward. But when you see a master, like when I saw you paint last time at Letchworth at the Grand Canyon of the East, um, I do you remember me painting?
Yeah.
That was not easy. My arm was killing me after I was done. I mean, it was like you just can't go in there as never painting in your life. Now that leads me to a question.
Yeah.
Let's say there are people out there that want to come and they want to learn how to paint, but they've never painted before. Should they not come?
No. I think plein air is a decent way to start. You're going to face obstacles and challenges whatever level you're at, and the goal is to meet you where you are at and then bring you up a notch and show you what's possible. So don't write yourself off if you haven't done this before. um,
So what if you have someone that is highly skilled? Can this be for all skill levels?
I believe it can. And the reason is because not only are we focusing on developing the art, developing the skills of art, we're also developing on putting the art, putting the career, and putting the skills that we are building into the context of worship and into the context of God first. And so I think when you're surrounded by a group and you're working on doing that together, you can have a different opportunity, a different way to grow. I didn't get to experience that with a group before I came to the guild. So I think that regardless of what level you're at, it's very enriching just to be around that.
Explain that a little bit more. So how are you going to combine art in worship?
Well, it's interesting. When you're in art school or when you are around artists or in galleries or in any of those environments, it's all about what the artist is trying to say. And there's
Mm.
so much pressure, like, oh my goodness, I have to think of something to say. I have to try to be relevant. We're going to listen, and we just
Mm.
go out there. We want to see what God is telling us, and then we're just going to relay that message. So it's just
Wow.
completely kind of, end over end approach to the normal way you would do art.
Wow. That's interesting. I like that a lot. That reminds me of a $21 million art show that took place in New York City. It was called The Gates. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It
No.
was this two artists, Jean-Claude and her husband. They actually, I'm not sure which one's the husband and which one's the wife, but Jean-Claude is the main artist,
Okay.
and they've been doing art for probably over 40 years now, 40, 50 years, and they're artists known all over the world, and they're considered some of the best artists in the world. So I started doing some research on them as I was preparing for the Guild
Yeah.
and just looking into some of the greatest artists of our times, and they're considered some of the greatest artists of our times. And so, I, before I asked you to come to the Guild, I started studying their art, and
Yeah.
I compared your art with theirs.
Yeah.
And Lisa, there is no comparison. Um, your art is beyond compare. Your art stands head and shoulders above theirs, and they're considered the best, some of the best in the world. Now, let me tell you why, and then what. And this leads into a segue of what you just said about art and worship, and that you were going to listen to what God was telling you through His creation. I think that's that reminds me of Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the heavens show His hand at work. That's just amazes. It amazes me. And really, I think people don't listen today. I don't think they hear the stream, the water. They don't hear the wind. The ruffling of the leaves in the trees and the insects in the background. They miss all the. It says that His voice is heard throughout the world. His voice, God's voice.
Yeah.
So so anyways, I'm studying Jean-Claude, and I'm studying the Gates, and they have I forget how many. I think it was like close to, it was over 100. And what they were is these steel poles that, if you've ever seen the front of a Japanese restaurant where they have these, it's like the poles on both sides, and then you have this top piece that kind of arches a little bit. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. So picture that with kind of a peach color saffron curtain hanging down from each one of them, and they would be blowing in the wind. And so picture hundreds of these gates throughout Central Park. Now, they had to bolt them into the ground. They took 25 years in the planning of doing this. Okay? And part of the reason it took 25 years is because previous mayors of New York wouldn't grant them permission. Finally, Bloomberg grants them permission. They spend $21 million on these gates, okay? And it lasts for 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, they take all of these frames and all of the saffron, and they put it in recyclable bins. It's recycled. The steel is recycled. The saffron is recycled. It's over with. Now, Lisa, when you're done painting, would you ever consider taking your paintings and putting them in a recycle bin?
I mean, there are moments, but
I know, but when you do a masterpiece, though,
oh no, absolutely not.
and
No.
if it cost you $21 million, you're
Yes.
not going to recycle it, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
they,
waste. Wow.
so they were asked the question, "What's the meaning of your art?" And they said, "There is no meaning. We
Right.
have absolutely no meaning behind this.
Right.
We are making no statement. We are doing art for art's sake."
Right.
So, where does it? Do you know where that comes from? Where do you have any idea where that?
My theory of this, and if you ask the secular world, they'll say photography, yada yada. I really think it was with the theory of evolution, and when people, lost all perception of meaning, lost the idea of creator God, at that point you have nothing. It is meaningless. So it's just
Mm.
sad. It is heartbreaking. And then you see it in the art schools, and it's just,
Mm.
it's difficult. So we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. No, but I think it's important for young people to know that there is a
Yes.
reason behind what we do. And when you see art that has meaning behind it, that's got its foundation in the beauty and majesty of God, it makes a difference in what you see. Rembrandt, D'Angelo, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, they were not Christians. Da Vinci and Angelo were not Christians, but they were studiers of the Word of God. They were influenced by the Psalms. They were influenced by the Bible. And so even though they weren't Christians, they were still influenced by the Word of God. And so I think it's so important that young people understand that their worldview really sets the foundation for the rest of their lives and what they're going to do, not just in painting, but in all of creativity. We're supposed to be what? Image bearers of our Creator God. And so tell me a little bit, what do you love when you paint? What is it that you love doing? What drives you?
Really, at the heart of it for me is just the relationship of light and shadow, and just how light makes things beautiful. My favorite
Mm.
thing to paint is just my family, everyday life. And you don't need to pose a model or do all these things. You just see the light coming in on a scene, and it could just be, but it has this transformative quality and this beauty to it. So that's really my joy. It's simple, but it's for me that's the highlight.
How do you learn light and shadow? Is that something they're going to learn that week?
It is. When we did our class in 2014, we were able to take a few mornings and have some studio time where I could lecture, and I brought in some props, and your staff had some lights for us. So I got to really demonstrate that out. Now, when you're um, really seriously pursuing the study of light and shadow, you will do that a lot more. So, for instance, one of my teachers told me, render an egg 100 times and you'll start to understand. And that's the reality of it. So, I'm going to show them, we're going to look at the tip of the iceberg. And I just really hope that ignites them to just really want to learn more and understand more and just practice more.
Do you have any specific instructions of what type of paints you want them to have, and um, does it matter what type of paints they're going to be using?
Um, we will be working in oils. You're welcome to work in traditional oils or water mixables. I work in a professional grade water mixable oil paint for many reasons. The goal with materials is you don't want to be tripping up on them on either side of the spectrum. So you can get so consumed in having this exact thing that it gets in your way. And you can have everything so jerry-rigged that that gets in your way. So the goal is we want our easels, our brushes, our paints to not be a stumbling block. They need to just be an extension of what we're doing, so we don't have to think too much about them. So call me, text me, get my information from Lamplighter. Go over this as many times as you need to try to figure out the right equipment for you. And also remember, anything that you're going to be painting with, you're going to be carrying. And I'll try not to have you hiking forever, but we need to be realistic about what supplies we're bringing. So, and I would love to help with that. It's a fun part of the adventure of outdoor painting.
Okay, so if they haven't bought their easels yet or their paints, they can email. They can go to lamplighter.net or lamplighterguild.com and find out all of the specifics of what to get.
The specifics will be there, and it can be confusing because you'll say, oh, this kind of easel, well, there's 15 different variations, and at that point you can get my contact info from them and get in touch with me. I don't mind that at all, because I would like to help everybody be set up for the best possible experience.
And I would say if you can get the better easel, all I know is that over the last 30 years, I have bought my wife at least 5 easels. So
Yeah.
they keep going up in grade just because they don't last long if they're not well built.
Yes, I agree. And don't get something too heavy. That's, you could get the cheaper one, but sometimes they weigh an absolute ton. So just be careful when you're looking at that as well. So,
What's your greatest, looking back at all the things that you've painted, what gives you the greatest joy? And is there one particular memory that was the best of all?
I do have a muse. It's my husband. I have painted him many, many, many times. It never gets old. And again,
Oh,
back to that whole falling in love thing, it's still a mystery to me, but he has, I look at his face and I still, those angles and that combination of lines are the most exciting thing I've ever seen.
oh,
So,
that's awesome. I don't
yes,
think I don't think I've ever seen a painting of your husband. You're going to have to put that on our website.
I'll do that. And he's a great sport about it. He doesn't mind. He's in collections in Canada and the United States, and
That's neat.
it is. It is neat.
So, what would be your greatest frustration where you just felt like you hit a block and you just couldn't go any further?
Um, right out of school, we were the typical naive people that thought, oh, you get out of school and life just happens and it's going to be great and we got our education, so we're going to have our careers in our laps. And it didn't really happen that way. And we really had to struggle. And we, of course, the harsh reality of what life was like with that. And but then it was just looking back, we both think it's just one of the greatest experiences we've had because it taught us how to pursue our fields in that way. Um, so the greatest obstacle was when you didn't think that there was an opportunity and you didn't understand where this was going, but you got up every day and you did the work. And
Mhm.
that takes so much discipline, and it's really hard because it can feel, it's hard to describe that feeling. It's just you don't have a boss that's going to say, hey, you need to go paint today. You have to get up and say, I need to paint today. And one of my favorite quotes is William Somerset Maugham, and he said he only writes when inspiration strikes, and it strikes every morning at 9 a.m. So that's, so I think getting over that hurdle where you think you need to wait till you're inspired, and that's kind of, inspiration comes through the work.
That is very profound, and that's true with writing as well. A lot of writers they can't get through that writer's block, and the key is putting the first word down on paper and start writing.
Is
Yeah,
the
that's
hardest step literally sitting down and getting the first stroke, the first word, just that sitting down to work. So, yes.
that's interesting. I think, and I think people need to understand whether or not they do better. Some people think to speak, and some people speak to think.
Hmm.
And so I speak to think, and that drives my wife absolutely crazy. She goes, "Why don't you think about what you're going to say first?" And it's like, but that's not how I think. I have to get words out, and my words are almost like putting paint on a canvas. And so as I get my words out, I start to form what I'm thinking. And I think young people, or all ages actually, I think in the guild setting, what that allows them that week, it allows them this amazing collaboration to ask any question they want throughout the week, not just with you, but with all of the teachers that will be there. And so what I love about the guild is it's not just one discipline that they're getting. They're getting Bible. They're going to get speakers. This year, we're going to have Sarah Groves is going to be singing, and she's going to be teaching at the guild this year. Isn't it great?
Amazing.
Um, it is. And so we're going to learn about her journey. I look at what you do, and I look what Sarah does. It's basically the same.
Yeah.
Just it's just another gift that God has given that
Yeah.
has taken time and effort to cultivate and to practice. I think she had to get up and start singing, times when she didn't want to.
Right.
Um, so how many hours would you think you have altogether? I know this is probably a question you can't answer thoroughly, but let's think about it. Since the time you started as a teenager till now, what do you think? What would be the guess?
I've done the math and, as roughly as I could just because of my own curiosity. I'm over the 10,000 hour mark.
Hey.
I mean, the key is getting quality hours in. That's
Yeah.
actually another thing I want to touch on with the students is, it takes a ton of a time to become a master in a lot of hours, but you want to be careful with how you're using those hours. Don't just put them in kind of by rote. There's a concept of deep practice where you're practicing at the edge of your abilities, and so you grow much more rapidly. I have one student that just seems to be able to click with that almost every time she paints, and the
Hmm.
growth is phenomenal because she's not being comfortable. She's like continually pushing the edge of her ability. So that's another topic I really want to touch on, is make the
Mm.
most of your practice time.
Mm. Do you ever take video courses where you're watching another painter and he's taking you through? Do you ever do that?
Oh yeah.
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 My wife loves that. Every time I go home, I see her at night taking a course, and she pushes herself. Now here, my wife and I, are Debbie's just getting ready to turn 60, and over the last, and sadly, I don't know if it's sadly or not, but Debbie helped me all these years with Lamplighter. She was traveling with me at conferences and talking about the books and supporting me as I spoke at conferences. And so here is this amazing artist, and for 25 years she gave up her art to
Wow.
to really support me in the ministry. And this last 5 years, she's no longer traveling with me, and she's now focusing on art full time. And she is painting probably close to 6 to 8 hours a day.
Wow.
And you should see Lisa. Her work right now is just unbelievable. So it doesn't stop. You're always pursuing. I think what really motivated her. I gave her a birthday present a few years ago, and she went to do some. She did some art with David LaFell. He had a workshop down in New Mexico, and she came back just lit up, and I think he's kind of like, I think he's known as the painter of light, kind of.
Yes.
He uses a lot of light and shadow as well. So let's look at your personal life. Okay, so you got over 10,000 hours. Interesting. You didn't know I was going to ask that question, but I asked it. And by the way, 10,000 hours is not that long. It's proven that it takes a minimum of 10,000 hours to become a master.
Mm-hmm.
But that's only 3 hours a day for 13 years.
Right.
So if a child is 8 years old and they're practicing, by the time they're 21, they can become a master.
Right.
That's just 3 hours a day of practice. And some of the great, Yo-Yo Ma and Beethoven, they studied for hours and hours. It wasn't just 3 hours.
No.
And I've learned that no one is born talented.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has to work for it. People thought that Yo-Yo Ma was a prodigy and that he just was gifted. But if you looked at his life and knew what he did, he had a violin in his hands at 3 years of age. He was listening to complex musical pieces from his sister and his parents when he was just an infant. And
Wow.
I don't think anyone's born talented. We all have to work at it.
I couldn't agree more. We saw consistently a pattern when we were, studying together at school. We would see students come in and you're kind of like, oh, they're all right. But they would work and they would work and they would work, and they were the ones that would really kind of shine and end up on top. Whereas if you felt comfortable in your skill set, you really weren't going to push yourself. Like, let's say you're that person that your family's always been like, oh, you're such a great artist, which is most of
Yeah.
it. And so then you kind of think you're a great artist and you don't realize you still have to learn. So when you come in and you feel like you're behind and you kind of have to really work hard, it's almost to your advantage, because that's what it takes for all of us, right?
That is excellent. That reminds me, there was a study, I forget her name, Carol, there was a study at Stanford University, and they had a group of students that, they had two groups of students, seventh graders. In one group, where they were both given a set of puzzles to put together. And the one group, they would comment, wow, you are really talented. Wow, you're just so talented. And the other group, they would say, wow, you work so hard. And so then both groups didn't know what they were saying to the other group. And then they were given another set of puzzles. The group that was told, you're really talented, you're so gifted, when they were given this next set of puzzles, they were given a choice between doing a extremely difficult set of puzzles or something easier. And it was 90% of the children that were told, you're really gifted, you're really talented, you're really good, 90% of them chose the easier puzzles on the second set. And over 50% of the students who were told, you worked really hard, chose the harder puzzle on the second time around.
Yeah.
And I think that parents need to understand that if they have a child that is excelling in a certain area, the worst thing that they could do to them is to say, wow, you are really gifted or you're really talented. They need to really focus on you work really hard, and the result of your hard work is giving you this.
And I have to say, hats off to my mom here because I think I worked, so hard in a lot of ways to get to the point where she couldn't find anything wrong. And that's to her credit because it wasn't like I could take her a picture and she'd be like, "Oh, that's so fantastic." I mean, she didn't sugarcoat it. She would say, "Oh, that's nice. Well, what is this over here? And why does that look like this?" And it made you think. And I remember at a young age, I mean, it didn't feel pleasant, but as a grown artist, I look back at that and I appreciate it so much. And I find it incredibly hard to do with my own kids. So it's a good, really good piece of advice.
Okay, so let's go to the topic of motivation.
Yeah.
Um, what motivated you to paint as opposed to, I don't know, watching movies and video games? What was the motivation behind all of this?
That's such a good question. I'm a driven person and I really love hard work. And my parents raised us well with those kind of values, which really helped. We weren't really going to be allowed to sit around and watch TV. I mean, we needed to be productive, and I think that kind of really carried through. So really have to give them a lot of credit for that. And then as a young adult, as a grown person, I think those lessons just really stuck with me. And I think the more I understood God's call on my life, I just couldn't take it for granted. And I look around me. I just finished reading the first Laura Ingalls Wilder book to my kids, and it was such a great reality check because I'm reminded of how hard people worked,
Mm-hmm.
how easy my life is in comparison, and how much time I still waste. I think they would be appalled at the way we live. And so that kind of reminds me, just out of thankfulness, out of gratefulness to God, I can't just waste this time. And it is
Mm-hmm.
hard to be disciplined and to still make oneself work, right? But that's a good.
That's that's excellent. Right now, the statistics today that on an average, children watch 63,000 hours of TV and videos by the time they're 17 years of age. 11,000 hours in school, learning basically not much, and 800 hours in church if they went to church 1 hour every week since birth. So 63,000 hours compared to 11,000 hours, and then only 800 hours of religious instruction. And so today, children, we're seeing a whole generation of young people growing up without the motivation that you had. Did you have Christian parents?
Yeah, my
Okay.
yeah, they raised us with those values, and I know that really made a huge difference.
So let's say there are parents out there listening. What would you say to parents today that could help reinforce those kinds of values where they are taking initiative, they're not wasting time, and they're willing to work hard, and they're willing to endure difficulty? How would you tell a parent? What would you tell a parent that would give them kind of some goals with their children?
As I kind of think about this with my own kids and I'm looking back at my life, I think my mom just really modeled that for us every day. She
Mm.
homeschooled us. She cooked just about everything from scratch. We were that family that we didn't buy food, we bought ingredients.
Wow.
And she was just a willing worker. And
Wow.
especially, to homeschool 30 years ago, that's a big challenge. They didn't have it all cut and dried and set up easy like it is today. So she was a hard worker, and that I think really impacted me. I think about it, in my home life here as I'm going about things with my kids, and I'm like, well, my mom wouldn't do that. She'd still get up and work even if she was tired. I need to go
Mm.
finish my job or, get the kitchen clean, make lunch, do whatever it is. Just
That's excellent. I think that really is the most important thing. We need to model what we want our children to live. Boy, that is so important. And I don't see a lot of driven people like that today. I mean, I'm pretty driven. My wife is very driven. Um, we have interns that come here at Lamplighter, and out of all the students we've had, I I can only see just a handful, not even a handful of students that have that driving force behind them. And it really is what makes the difference. What makes the difference is that the driving force is connected with a thankfulness for what God has given them, because that's what drives me. I don't know what else I would be, because I was a lazy kid growing up. When I got saved, I mean, my whole worldview changed because I saw this incredible creation for the first time, and it was like, wow, this is amazing. And then realizing how much God loves me and how much He did for me and how much He continues to do for me, that's what motivates me. And that, you realize that what your mom did for you. So
Yeah.
that was a motivating factor for you. And so I think it's never too late, but I think when kids really start connecting with the reality of a personal God, of an intimate relationship with God, and they experience Him on a faith level, I think that ignites people. That's where they start to be driven, because now all of a sudden there's purpose. I'm reading a book right now called The Treasury by Frank Borum, and Martin Luther, Tyndale, John Wycliffe, um, John Newton, John Wesley. I just read David Livingstone last night. These men were driven,
Yes.
and it was all because, interesting, they all had one driving force. They all had a specific Bible verse that drove them. And David Livingstone was that God will always be with him; He'll never forsake him. He hung on to that. And these men went through such. I mean, most of their wives died. Some of them were burned at the stake. I like John Wycliffe's. He was hated so much by the Pope that the Pope dug him up and burned his body 42 years later.
Wow.
But these men left such a mark on this world. David Livingstone, he would not give up, and as a result, Africa opened up to missions, and people came to know Christ.
Yeah.
So motivation. Where was I going to go with that? 2 Peter chapter 1.
Yeah.
I would encourage everybody listening to memorize 2 Peter chapter 1 verses 3 through 10. So here's what it says.
Okay.
That God's divine power has given us everything that we need for life and godliness. That statement in itself is amazing. That God has given us everything we need for life and godliness. But then it says this, according to, and it's the word epigenosis. The word gnosis is the word for knowledge. The word epigenosis is for a fuller knowledge or an intimate knowledge. So God's divine power has given us everything that we need for life and godliness according to a full intimate knowledge. So we have access to everything that we need, but we can't access it until we have a full intimate knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. And then it says this, called to glory and excellence. God has called us to His own glory and excellence, by which He's also granted unto us great and magnificent promises, that through these we might become partners in His divine nature. And Lisa, when I see you doing art, when I see John Fornoff directing and producing, Paul McCusker writing, Sarah Groves singing, when I see the masters, John Campbell on the piano, when I see the masters at work, what I see is a divine partnership, and that's what. And then it says this at the end of that verse. It says this, that we then can escape the lusts that are in this world. Therefore, give all diligence, add to your faith virtue and knowledge, self-control, perseverance, godliness, brotherly kindness, and love. For if you practice these qualities, it says, you will never fall. And so I think that is really the key behind motivation, behind initiative, behind creativity. Just picture this. We're partnering with God Himself. God has redeemed us, lives inside of us, so that we now can partner with Him. When you paint, you're an extension of God's hand. God paints every night in the sunsets, and now you get to paint with Him. Do you remember the painting that you did that now hangs up on my wall?
Absolutely.
So everyone that's listening, catch this. Lisa's painting this I think it's a masterpiece. And it starts to rain. And all of a sudden, the raindrops start to hit the painting. And isn't it interesting on that painting? You have all these tiny little drops. Do you remember what it looked like?
Yeah.
And most people at this moment, I would think some artists would be like livid, like, oh no, my painting's ruined, you know? Do you remember what you said that day?
I think you better quote it.
You said God has left his marks on this painting.
Yes.
And there was a partnership. The two of you were painting together. And it was like, and all of a sudden, immediately, I went from, oh wow, rain just got on that painting. Rain just got on that oil painting. My mind shifted immediately to, oh wow, this is a divine partnership. The two of you painted this together.
Yes. It's so true, and it's one of the things that I love so much about our guild week is that that group of students just joined me in that kind of enthusiasm where we wanted to see the sovereignty of God in everything. If we had a rain day, it was like, well, then, there's something here for us in this, and I think I really hope that our next group of students can embrace that as enthusiastically, where we just know that every day is going to have God's purpose on it. We just need to go with that, look for that, and be in that moment.
That's awesome. So if there are folks that are listening right now and they're wondering if they should come to the Guild, all I'll say is this: we're not going to be having the Guild next year. We're going to have it in 2018. We're going to have the Family Foundations Conference next year. So I want people to realize that if they're considering coming to the Guild and they don't know if they should or not, this is the year to come. It's not just painting. It's not just dramatic arts. It's everything. It is really connecting with his divine power to a call to creative excellence. That's really what the Guild is about. And the Bible that is being taught here with Colin Smith and the Bible teachers, the music with Sarah Groves, Buddy Green is going to be here. He played at Carnegie Hall, got a standing ovation.
Wow.
He is going to be playing his harmonica. Lisa, when you hear this, it sounds like a full orchestra, just with one instrument. It's amazing. So they're all going to be here. Buddy Green, Jeff Taylor, Sarah Groves, John Fornoff, John Dorick. John Dorick did the music for Samson. That's down at Sight and Sounds Theater right now. We're going to have Paul McCusker, one of the greatest writers. He did all of the Adventures, not all, but most of Adventures in Odyssey, and then Focus on the Family Radio Theater. He's going to be here. Kim Winey's going to be back with us in photography. And then we're going to have the legendary Bob Garner in filmmaking. He works with Disney. He's been one of the writers, directors, and producers of some of the greatest Disney works, and he's a Christian. And he's got a solid worldview, and he is going to emphasize how important the worldview is in filmmaking. Now, this will be interesting for our folks that are listening. I was at a meeting where there were the Disney executives, Fox, and Paramount Pictures were there, and there was a large audience. And this one mother, you could tell she wanted to have her voice heard, and she wanted these men to answer her question for her son. She was there on behalf of her 22-year-old son, and her son had already gotten a bachelor's degree, and now he's going to go into postgraduate work or become the great filmmaker. He wanted to follow the path of being a great filmmaker. And so she finally got their attention, and she said, what can my son do next to become a great filmmaker? And the Fox guy looked at the Disney guy, and the Disney guy looked at the Paramount guy, and the Fox guy finally said, I'll answer that question. And then the Disney guy spoke up and says, well, but let me just say something. And the Disney guy said, study philosophy. And then the Fox guy said, study theology. And the mother was like, but what does he do to become a great filmmaker? And they looked at her and said, study philosophy and theology. Learn, grow.
Yes, it's so true. And I think today we see education very compartmentalized, where you don't get this amazing crossover. And it's so fun to just get to experience the different medias working together and learning from each other. And the masters that Mark has, they're just phenomenal people because they are very approachable. They're just kind. I mean, I feel like I'm sitting at the feet of those masters and they're sitting at the feet of the master. And it's just this beautiful experience where we're all there to learn and they're there to serve. And I think that's another thing. We're not, nobody is a college professor trying to fill a seat or something. We're there
Yeah.
because there's a very strong desire to teach.
That is so true. I think what we have at the Guild is we have a combination of two of the greatest powers in the universe. We have a high level of mastery excellence mixed with humility. And that combination is just, in both of them, that combination of excellence, partnering with God, a divine partnership with a sense of extreme humility, knowing that all of our talents have really been bestowed upon us through our hard work, but because of the grace of God. I think one of the things I love about the Guild, and I love your picture just now, that all of us are sitting at the Master's feet. That's really what the Guild is all about. It's really connecting with Him. Unless, and Lisa, if this does not happen, if there's ever a year where it doesn't happen, I don't know if I'd ever want to have another Guild again. It would really be
Right.
it would be scary for that to happen. So this would be our 6th year. 5 years in a row, we have seen God show up at the Guild. And this year, I might even change the theme. The theme has been, up to this point, fanning the flames of the gift that's in you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I may change it, and or at least maybe have a second one, and it's this. Touching the hem of His garment.
Yes.
So just hear me out on this. Remember when the woman touches the hem of His garment? Remember what Jesus said?
Yeah.
What did He say?
He said, your faith has made you well.
Okay, yep. And just before that, He asks the disciples, and He says, "Who touched me?" And the disciples say, "Lord, how could you ask who touched you? Everyone's rubbing against you. You're in the middle of this crowd."
Right.
And then He says, "But somebody touched me."
Yeah.
And He says, "For virtue
Yeah.
or power has left me."
Right.
And I think, and then the woman comes up and says, and she's afraid, and she says, "It was me." And woman, your faith has made you well. But I think that speaks volumes to me in a much louder way than just who touched me. I think Jesus, God Himself, asks the question, "Who touched me?" I think God wants to be touched.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally, spiritually, with all of that's within us. I think that our lives need to be such an expression of earnestness and desire to connect with Him that He senses somebody touched me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would like to see that happen at the Guild this year, where all of us, students and teachers both, that we are having a week where we want to touch the hem of His garment. And God Himself says, who did that? Who touched me? So, what do you think?
Oh, yeah. I couldn't agree more. And been thinking a lot about the passion in our work. And I think that's where it comes from. And I'm sure you've seen it and had this experience. Do you ever have that moment when you're listening to a great piece of music or someone sing and you just are flowing tears? Because their performance is so passionate. And I've been asking myself, what is it what are they doing? And as I've been watching this and trying to figure that out, they're not holding back. They're in it 110%. They're, involved, and I think that's where we need to be. Like you said, pursuing God 100% with our craft 100%, and we're not holding back from the million things that we could hold back from. There's fear of success, there's fear of failure, there's so much fear, and we just need to love the Lord, love what we're doing, pursue that, and let go of the fear. And I think really, really big things can happen at that point.
I love that. And I'm sure who said it, but failure upon failure, success is failure upon failure.
Yes.
The
Yes.
I think it was William Carey that might have said, um, expect great things from God, attempt great things for God.
Yes,
I like that.
yes.
Well, Lisa Mistiuk, it's been a joy. Wow. If this is just I think we're just scratching the surface of what the Guild Week is going to be like. I am so excited to have you back here. You were my first choice. You were my first choice last year as well, and of course you couldn't be here. So I think this year is going to be extraordinary. I think we're going to touch the hem of his garment that week. And those of you that are listening to this interview or watching it, no matter what age you are, no matter what you're doing in life, if you're looking for a spiritual renaissance, a spiritual reformation, um, I have seen it happen for the last 5 years. There has been nothing in my lifetime that matches what takes place at the Guild. And I think part of the reason that it is so life-changing is because when you bring masters together in one place that have that high level of excellence where they're partnering with God and that deep sense of humility that they're so thankful for what God has allowed them to become, um, it's like sitting at the master's feet. I think where you see, Lisa, that's a beautiful picture. I'm never going to forget that, where we're all together, but we're really sitting at the master's feet
Yes,
together with our students.
yes.
Um, Anything in closing words, Lisa, that you would like to say to the folks?
You know, I'm going to be praying for you already, the students that are coming. I can't wait to meet you. I am probably over enthusiastic. This is just exciting to get to share it. So, and I seriously mean that. If you have questions, reach out. You know, I'm very approachable. And I would just love to walk you through any of the questions you have about getting ready or coming. And of course, Mark's staff is phenomenal as well. They're just wonderful people to work with and be around. So we're there.
So, so in closing, if you have three books that would be the most life-changing books, one could be an art book, or it could be a biography, or one of your favorite books. What are the three favorite books that have influenced you the most?
Okay, as an artist, there's a book called Lives of the Artists. It was written by Giorgio Vasari in the 1500s. I can't even tell you how many times I've listened to this book. It's phenomenal. And again, like you were saying with Michelangelo and Da Vinci, they might not have been Christians themselves, but they were coming from that perspective. And he starts at the beginning of art history. It's like the first art history ever written. And so as you're going through this, you're getting from that perspective. And then he's a contemporary of Michelangelo and Da Vinci. So it's just it's incredible. It's one of my favorite things to listen to when I work. Other than that, on a personal note, there's a biography of Theodore Roosevelt. I see it on your shelf behind you. That book transformed my life as a young person. He's one of my great heroes. And just his work ethic, literally, it just ignited my soul, kind of, just like, wow, that's awesome. And the last one, and this was transformative for my husband and I when we were just out of school trying to get over that slump of what to do. It's called The Art of War. It's called the War of Art. It's a play on words.
Yes.
Art. Okay, now this isn't from a Christian perspective. I think there's some profanity in it, so I wouldn't really recommend it across the board, but his message is phenomenal. And he's saying the overall gist of it is that when you pursue anything that is good, whether it's spiritual, whether it's artistic, whether it's just to be healthy, whenever you choose to pursue something good, you are going to face resistance. Now, as Christians, we, classify that as the world, the flesh, and the devil. And he just calls it resistance in general. But I think that's something really important to remember. It's not like you're going to decide to be on this path and, oh, I'm going to get up every day and I'm going to have my quiet time and then I'm going to work on my art or do whatever it is, and it's just going to happen. You're going to, and in my case, 90% of the time I'm battling myself. I have to overcome myself every single day again to just really, pursue what I was meant to pursue and overcome that resistance. And that book just kind of opened my eyes to that. Whereas before, you kind of allowed all those obstacles to be in the way, or you made excuses, or you just assumed it was somebody else or something else. And once I read that, it kind of clicked. No, it's actually just me. I'm my worst stumbling block in this situation.
I'm going to quote a verse out of context. Ready?
Ready.
It's in Ecclesiastes chapter 12. It says, "The making of many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome to the flesh. So some people have used that verse to show that reading a lot isn't healthy for you, and printing books isn't the best thing you could be doing. Now that's really, for me, being involved in publishing doesn't really go a long way. So let me quote the verse in its entirety. You ready? So it starts off in chapter 1, verse 1, says, the words of the preacher. So the very first word in Ecclesiastes is the word word, debar. And it's framed with chapter 12. And chapter 12 says, the preacher sought out like goads and nails, nailing words of value, of purpose, words of truth, and words of wisdom. So Ecclesiastes is framed with words. Okay? So I, the preacher, and the word preacher is an interesting word. It's the word koholeth in Hebrew. And it means to assemble things together, or to collect things. The word koholeth, or Ecclesiastes, that's where we get the word Ecclesiastes. It's from the word preacher. I, the preacher, that's the word Ecclesiastes. And that's where we get the word church in the New Testament. So the ecclesia, Ecclesiastes, or preacher, or koholeth, is talking about the assembling of something. That's where we get the idea of church. It's an assembly of a group of people together. That's where this whole idea comes from. And so the preacher is assembling words together. He's assembling, he's gone throughout the whole world, and he's looked at the world, and he's looked at it in two different ways. The things that he's seen under the sun have left him with an emptiness. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity, says the preacher. For everything under the sun is vain. But then he says, but I've also seen things under heaven. And the things under heaven, I see that God has given a gift to man, which gives him joy. And so when you see life from under the sun, it's vanity, it's empty. When you see life from under the heaven, from under heaven's perspective, from God's perspective, it's joyful and it's purposeful. And at the very end, he says, I am going to give you 3 words that you can nail down and be used for the rest of your life, to use as a template or a confinement or a boundary to guide the rest of your life. And this is what he says: words of purpose, words of truth, and words of wisdom. And Solomon says, in anything outside of that, the making of many books outside of those 3 things, words of purpose, truth, and wisdom, there is no end. And the study of that kind of stuff outside of those 3 is wearisome to the flesh. And so I think it's important for parents and students to understand that we need to confine ourselves to the things that we read, the things that we study, the things that we prepare our lives with. Needs to have those 3 things. And again, it doesn't have to be a Christian book, but it has to have purpose, truth, and wisdom. Or the word purpose can also mean the word value. Words of value, words of truth, and words of wisdom. And so when I talk to students about how they're going to prepare for life, some of the books that have inspired me have been Christian Manifesto by Francis Schaeffer. That's a book that every Christian must read. So Christian Manifesto, Francis Schaeffer. Addicted to Mediocrity by his son, Frankie Schaeffer. It's another great book. I think everybody should read The Art of Leadership is a great book. And then lastly, I think everyone should read The Disappearance of Childhood. That is it's by Neil Postman. It's not a Christian book, but it's very helpful to understand what's going on in our culture today. I'm trying to think if there's any others that are real important that should be read. There's a devotional called Let Go, and there's also a Message to Garcia, deals with initiative. That's a great book. This is the one you have to read. Everyone must read this book. It's a tiny little book. It can be read in 20, 30 minutes. It's called The Missing Years of Nazareth.
Okay.
It tells you what Jesus did from the time he was 12 to the time he was 30. Lisa, if you were to tell me that you knew what Jesus did in those missing 18 years, I would have said, not a chance. I went to Israel and I actually studied what Jesus might have been doing. I went up to stay with where the Essenes lived
Yeah.
and saw the markings and saw the scrolls and the Hebrew words, and it looked like Jesus was there, but he wasn't. The Bible actually tells you where Jesus was during those 18 years.
Wow.
And it will tell you not only what he was doing, but it also serves as a pattern for what we're to do to prepare for our lives during those most important years of 12 to 30 years of age. So anyways, you'll have to read it. It's called The Missing Years of Nazareth. Well, Lisa, thank you so much. This has been an exceptional time. I have enjoyed every minute of this. I love the direction that God took us. It has been very rich. Thank you so much, and God bless you. And we'll see you June 25th through July 1st here at the Lamplighter Guild in Mount Morris, New York. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. And thank you all for attending tonight. Blessings.